The sound of flesh meeting flesh echoed through the marble foyer of the Lagos mansion as Adunni's palm connected with her husband's cheek. "You brought her into my house?" Adunni's voice cut through the air like broken glass, her designer heels clicking against the imported Italian tiles as she stepped closer to the woman cowering behind Kemi, her husband of 12 years. "What would you do if you walked in on this? Hit like if you've been betrayed, and comment below where you're watching from." The woman, barely 25, with bleached hair and a cheap weave, had the audacity to push past Adunni's wheelchair-bound mother, Mama Folake, who sat quietly by the entrance, her frail hands gripping the armrests of her chair. "Move, old woman. You're in the way," the girl spat, her stiletto catching the wheel of the wheelchair. Mama Folake winced as her chair jerked backward, but before Adunni could react, the girl continued her assault. "You people think you're better than everyone. This man doesn't want you anymore. You're extra. Excess baggage." The words hung in the air like poison as Adunni watched her mother's face crumple with humiliation. Kemi, her husband of 12 years, stood frozen like a deer in headlights, his expensive Armani suit wrinkled from whatever activities had transpired in their bedroom upstairs. "Bisola, please." Kemi finally found his voice, reaching for the young woman's arm. "Let's just go. Go." Adunni's laugh was hollow, bitter. "You think you can just go?" She moved with the grace of a lioness stalking her prey, her silk blouse pristine despite the chaos erupting around her. At 42, Adunni Okafor remained stunning. Her dark skin glowed with health, her natural hair styled in an elegant afro, and her business suit spoke of success and power. She had built an empire from nothing, starting with a small fabric shop in Yaba and expanding into one of Nigeria's largest textile corporations. But none of that mattered now as she stared at her husband's betrayal incarnate. "Mama," Adunni said softly, kneeling beside her mother's wheelchair. "Are you hurt?" Mama Folake's eyes, once bright with the wisdom of her 70 years, now sparkled with unshed tears. The stroke she'd suffered 2 years ago had left her left side paralyzed, but her mind remained sharp. She had built the foundation of the family's wealth through her small-scale trading business decades ago, sacrificing everything for her daughter's education and success. "I'm fine, my child," Mama Folake whispered, though the tremor in her voice betrayed her pain. Bisola rolled her eyes dramatically. "Oh please, with all this drama. Kemi, let's go to your new apartment. I can't stand being around these people anymore." "New apartment?" Adunni's voice was dangerously quiet. Kemi's face went pale. In his arrogance, he hadn't considered that Bisola might reveal their living arrangements so carelessly. "Adunni, I can explain." "Explain what?" "That you've been keeping your mistress in a home I paid for? That you've been lying to me for months while I supported your failed business ventures." Adunni stood slowly, her movements controlled despite the rage building inside her. The domestic betrayal cut deeper than she had imagined possible. They had no children together, a source of constant pressure from his family and society, but she had poured her love into their marriage, supporting his dreams even when his construction company repeatedly failed to secure major contracts. "It's not what you think," Kemi stammered, loosening his tie nervously. "Business has been difficult, and Bisola, she understands the pressure I'm under." "Business?" Adunni's voice rose. "What business? The one I've been funding for 5 years? The one that exists only because I sign the checks?" Bisola stepped forward, her cheap perfume clashing with the subtle scent of Adunni's French fragrance. "He doesn't need your money anymore. We're starting fresh, and old women like you and your mother are just dead weight." The silence that followed was deafening. Even Kemi seemed to realize his mistress had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Adunni looked at her mother, at the woman who had sold her gold jewelry to pay for Adunni's university education abroad, who had worked 18-hour days to ensure her daughter had opportunities she never had. The same woman now being dismissed as dead weight in her own home. Something cold and calculating settled over Adunni's features. "Dead weight," she repeated softly, almost to herself. She walked to the mahogany table in the foyer, where the morning's mail lay scattered. Her fingers found the document she'd been meaning to show Kemi, the final property deed for the new apartment complex in Victoria Island. The same complex where, unknown to her, he'd been setting up his love nest with Bisola. "Kemi," she said, her voice unnaturally calm. "What did you tell Bisola about our assets?" "What do you mean?" he asked, confusion replacing his earlier defiance. "About the properties, the businesses, the investments." She turned the deed over in her hands, noting the fresh ink on her signature. "Did you tell her they were yours?" Kemi's throat worked soundlessly. In all their years of marriage, he had maintained the facade of being the primary breadwinner, never explicitly telling Adunni that he had no legal claim to her inherited wealth and self-built empire. His pride had demanded it, and she had allowed him the dignity of that illusion. But illusions, Adunni realized, could be shattered. "They are ours," he said weakly. "What's mine is yours, what's yours is mine. That's marriage." Adunni smiled, a slow, predatory smile that would have warned a wiser man. "Is it?" She looked at Bisola, who was checking her phone with obvious boredom, completely unaware that the ground was shifting beneath her feet. The girl had no idea that every property, every business account, every investment portfolio was registered in Adunni's name alone, a legacy of her late father's wisdom about protecting family wealth. "Well," Adunni said, folding the deed carefully, "I suppose it's time you both learned exactly what belongs to whom." She reached for her phone, scrolling to her lawyer's contact information. Tomorrow, she decided, would bring some very interesting revelations. But tonight, she had a cheating spouse to destroy. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more gripping stories like this. What do you think happens next? Comment below. The Lagos morning sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Adunni's corner office on the 20th floor of the Okafor Towers. She sat behind her glass desk, fingers steepled, watching the city wake up beneath her. The irony wasn't lost on her. While her husband slept peacefully in their bed, believing his secrets were safe, she had spent the entire night making phone calls that would change everything. Her assistant, Funmi, knocked softly before entering with a steaming cup of coffee and a thick manila folder. "Good morning, Ma." "The documents you requested," Funmi said, her voice carefully neutral. As Adunni's right hand for 8 years, Funmi knew better than to ask questions about her boss's personal life, but the tension in the office was palpable. "Thank you. Any word from Barrister Adelique?" "He's in the conference room, Ma, waiting with the other lawyers." Adunni nodded, opening the folder to review the property documents one final time. Every deed, every business registration, every bank account, all in her name or her mother's. Kemi's name appeared nowhere except as a beneficiary on her life insurance policy, a detail she made a mental note to change. Her phone buzzed with a text from Kemi. "Where are you? We need to talk about yesterday." She almost laughed at his audacity. After bringing his mistress into their home, after allowing that woman to disrespect her disabled mother, he wanted to talk. Instead of responding, she gathered the documents and walked to the conference room, where 3 of Lagos's most expensive lawyers waited. Barrister Adelique, a thin man with silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses, stood as she entered. "Mrs. Okafor, I've reviewed everything as you requested. The separation is quite clear-cut from a legal standpoint." "Good. What about the properties?" "All registered in your name or your family trust. Your husband has no legal claim to any of them, including the apartment where he's been." Adelique paused delicately. "Where he's been keeping his mistress," Adunni finished. "The apartment that I purchased and furnished without his knowledge." The second lawyer, Mrs. Adebayo, leaned forward. "We should also discuss the business accounts. If he's been representing himself as co-owner to secure credit or contracts." "That's fraud," the third lawyer, Mr. Ogbonna, interjected. "We could pursue criminal charges." Adunni considered this. Criminal charges would destroy Kemi completely, but they would also drag her name through the courts. She had built her reputation carefully over 2 decades. She wouldn't risk it for revenge, no matter how satisfying it might be. "No criminal charges. But I want him removed from any business capacity immediately. Revoke his access cards, his signatory powers, everything." "Already done," Funmi said quietly from the doorway. Security changed the codes at 6 a.m. As the lawyers discussed the technical details of asset protection, Adunni's mind drifted to her mother. Mama Folake had been unusually quiet during breakfast, her appetite non-existent. The humiliation from yesterday had cut deep, deeper than any physical injury could have. Her phone rang. Kemi again. This time she answered. Yes. Adunni, where are you? I went to your office, but security said my card doesn't work. Interesting. Have you considered why that might be? The silence stretched between them before he spoke again. His voice strained. We need to discuss this rationally. What happened yesterday? Bisola was upset. She didn't mean. She didn't mean to assault my disabled mother. She didn't mean to call her deadweight in her own home. Your mother is fine. Don't be dramatic. The casual dismissal of her mother's pain ignited something volcanic in Adunni's chest. My mother is fine? Kemi, that woman pushed my mother's wheelchair. She insulted her in her own home. A home my money built. Our money, he corrected automatically. No, Adunni said softly. My money. My properties. My business. My everything. What are you saying? I'm saying you should check your bank accounts today. And maybe call the apartment complex in Victoria Island, the one where you've been playing house. Ask them who owns the building. The sharp intake of breath on the other end told her he was beginning to understand. Adunni, you can't. Can't what? Protect my assets from a cheating husband? Control my own property? Remove unauthorized persons from my businesses? Unauthorized persons? I'm your husband. And she's your mistress. Neither of you has any legal right to anything I've built. She ended the call and turned back to the lawyers, who had been pretending not to listen to every word. I want an eviction notice served at the Victoria Island apartment by noon today. Both of them out by this weekend. That may be difficult, Mrs. Adebayo warned. Tenant rights. There is no tenant. There's no lease agreement, no rental payments, no legal occupancy. It's trespassing. Adunni's voice was ice-cold. Handle it. Barrister Adele Eek made notes quickly. What about the matrimonial home? This gave Adunni pause. The house in Banana Island had been their shared space for 8 years. Legally, it was hers, but emotionally. Leave that for now. But I want documentation prepared. If he brings her back to that house, I want him removed immediately. Her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Your husband says you've lost your mind. When he leaves you for good, don't come crying. Bisola. The girl's boldness was almost admirable. Adunni showed the message to Funmi, who read it with raised eyebrows. Shall I have this traced and documented? Funmi asked. Oh yes. And Funmi? Call the Victoria Island property manager. I want to know exactly what my husband told them about owning that apartment. As her team dispersed to handle the various legal maneuvers, Adunni remained in the conference room, staring out at Lagos's sprawling landscape. She had built an empire in this city, rising from her mother's small trading business to become one of Nigeria's most successful female entrepreneurs. She would not let a cheating husband and his insolent mistress destroy what 3 generations of women had built. Her phone rang again. This time, it was Mama Folake's caregiver. Ma, your mother is asking for you. She says she has something important to tell you about the properties. Adunni frowned. What properties? She won't say, Ma. But she's very insistent. She keeps saying, the girl doesn't know, over and over. A chill ran down Adunni's spine. Her mother's mind was sharp despite her physical limitations. If Mama Folake had information about the properties that even Adunni didn't know. I'm coming home, she said, gathering her purse. As she drove through Lagos traffic, Adunni couldn't shake the feeling that yesterday's confrontation had been just the beginning. There were layers to this situation she hadn't yet uncovered, secrets that might change everything. Her phone buzzed with another text from Kemi. You've made a terrible mistake. This isn't over. Adunni smiled grimly. He was right about one thing. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. Like if you're Team Adunni. What do you think Mama Folake knows that could change everything? Drop your theories in the comments. Mama Folake's bedroom overlooked the garden where she once tended to her prized roses before the strokes stole her mobility. Now she sat propped against silk pillows, her weathered hands clutching a manila envelope that looked decades old. "Mama, what is it?" Adunni asked, settling into the chair beside the bed. The caregiver, Patience, retreated quietly to give them privacy. "That girl yesterday," Mama Folake began, her voice stronger than it had been in months. "She called me dead weight. Said old women like us are excess." "Mama, don't let her words." "She doesn't know," Mama Folake interrupted, tapping the envelope. "None of them know what this old woman owns." Adunni frowned, recognizing the envelope from her mother's collection of important documents. She had assumed it contained birth certificates or old family photos. "What are you talking about?" Mama Folake's eyes glittered with a sharpness that reminded Adunni of the formidable businesswoman her mother had been before age and illness slowed her down. "Open it." Inside the envelope were property deeds, dozens of them, land titles, building permits, and ownership documents for properties across Lagos, Abuja, and Port Harcourt. Adunni's hands trembled as she recognized addresses: the shopping complex in Ikeja, the residential estate in Lekki, the warehouse district in Apapa. "Mama, these are mine. All of them. Purchased over 40 years of trading, saved penny by penny, registered under companies I created before you were even born." Mama Folake's voice carried quiet pride. "I never told you because a woman's wealth makes her a target. But now." Adunni stared at the documents, calculating the value in her head. Conservative estimates put the portfolio at over 2 billion naira, wealth that dwarfed even her own substantial holdings. "You own all of this?" "We own all of this," Mama Folake corrected. "Everything passes to you upon my death, as outlined in my will. But some properties—" She pointed to a specific deed. "Some are already in your name, transferred years ago for tax purposes." The deed was for the apartment complex in Victoria Island, the same complex where Kemi had been keeping Bisola. "The Victoria Island Apartments," Adunni whispered. 24 units. Purchased when the area was still developing. "I never told you because I wanted you to build your own success, not rely on inherited wealth." Mama Folake's smile was sly. "But that foolish husband of yours has been telling everyone he owns property there." The implications hit Adunni like a physical blow. Kemi hadn't just been cheating. He had been fraudulently representing himself as a property owner, possibly using the apartment's value to secure loans or investments for his failing business. "How long have you known about his lies?" "Longer than you might think. My old trading partners still talk. Word travels in business circles when a man claims to own what belongs to a woman." Mama Folake reached for Adunni's hand. "I wanted to see if he would confess to you himself, but yesterday he showed his true character. Yesterday his little girlfriend showed me exactly who they both are." The steel in Mama Folake's voice reminded Adunni why her mother had been feared and respected in the markets of Lagos. "Dead weight," she called me. "Excess baggage." Adunni's phone buzzed with a call from Barrister Adelik. "Mrs. Okafor, we have a problem. Your husband has been to 3 different banks this morning, claiming to own the Victoria Island property. He's used it as collateral for loans totaling nearly 50 million naira." The blood drained from Adunni's face. 50 million? The banks are calling for verification. If they discover the fraud, handle it. I want those loans frozen and investigated immediately. After hanging up, she turned to find Mama Folake watching her with knowing eyes. "How much deeper does this go?" Adunni asked. "Check the Lekki estate property. The one with the shopping mall." Adunni's heart sank. She pulled out her phone and called her financial advisor. "David, I need you to run a full credit check on my husband. Look for any loans or investments where he's used property as collateral." The wait felt eternal. Finally, David called back. "Mrs. Okafor, this is extensive. He's used various properties to secure loans from 6 different institutions. Total exposure is approximately 120 million naira. The room spun around Adunni. 120 million naira in fraudulent loans, all secured against properties he didn't own. That's not all, David continued. Some of these loans were taken jointly with someone named Bisola Adesanya. They've been presenting themselves as business partners in a development company. Adunni closed her eyes. The betrayal ran deeper than infidelity. It was systematic financial fraud that threatened everything her family had built. "Mama," she said quietly, "he's not just a cheating husband. He's a criminal. Then we treat him like one." Before Adunni could respond, the house phone rang. Patience answered and returned looking troubled. "Ma, there are people at the gate. They say they're from Standard Bank. They want to speak with Mr. Kemi about property verification." Through the bedroom window, Adunni could see a black sedan parked outside their gates, with two men in dark suits standing beside it. Her phone rang. Kemi, calling frantically. "Adunni, there's been a misunderstanding. The banks think there's some problem with the property documents." "Because there is a problem, Kemi. You don't own those properties. You've been committing fraud." "It's not fraud. We're married. What's yours is mine." "Not legally. Not when you're using properties I own to secure secret loans with your mistress." The silence stretched between them. "You investigated me," he said finally, his voice hollow. "You gave me no choice. Adunni, if this comes out, if the banks press charges, then you should have thought about that before you decided to play property tycoon with other people's assets." "I'll pay it back. Give me time, I'll figure something out." "With what money?" "Your construction business that only exists because I fund it." Through the window, she watched as the men from the bank approached the front door. "They're here, Kemi. The banks want to verify ownership of the properties you've been using as collateral." "Don't let them in. Please, Adunni, we can work this out." "No, we can't." Her voice was steady, final. "You brought this on yourself when you chose her over our marriage, when you disrespected my mother in her own home. This will destroy me. You destroyed yourself." She hung up and turned to Mama Folake, who had been listening to every word. "What do we do now, Mama?" The old woman's smile was sharp as a blade. "Now we show them what happens when they mistake kindness for weakness. Let the banks in, my daughter. Let them see exactly who owns what." As Patience went to open the gates, Adunni felt a cold certainty settle over her. The naive wife who had trusted blindly was gone. In her place sat a woman who had built an empire and now had the power to either save or destroy the man who had betrayed her. The choice, she realized, was entirely hers. But first, she wanted to see exactly how deep Kemi's lies went. "What do you think? Should Adunni show mercy or let the banks destroy Kemi?" Comment your thoughts on the betrayal and don't forget to subscribe for the explosive next chapter. The Standard Bank representatives sat in Adunni's living room like funeral directors delivering bad news. Mr. Ogundipe, the senior loan officer, spread documents across the mahogany coffee table while his colleague, Mrs. Hassan, took notes on her tablet. "Mrs. Okafor, we need to understand the discrepancy," Mr. Ogundipe said carefully. "Your husband has been servicing loans totaling 58 million naira using the Victoria Island property as primary collateral." 58 million? Adunni kept her voice level despite the shock. Earlier, Barrister Adelik had mentioned 50 million. The numbers were growing. "Plus accumulated interest and fees," Mrs. Hassan added. "But according to our verification this morning, the property is registered solely in your name." "That's correct." "Did you authorize your husband to use this property as collateral?" "Absolutely not." The two bankers exchanged glances. Mrs. Hassan leaned forward. "Mrs. Okafor, this puts us in a very difficult position. Either your husband has committed fraud, or there's been a serious miscommunication about asset ownership within your marriage." Before Adunni could respond, the front door opened with a bang. Kemi burst in, his usually pristine appearance disheveled, his shirt wrinkled and sweat-stained despite the air conditioning. "Gentlemen," he said, forcing a smile that looked more like a grimace. I see you've met my wife. This is all a simple misunderstanding. Mr. Ogundipe stood slowly. Mr. Okafor, we need to discuss the property documentation you provided to secure your loans. Of course, of course. Kemi moved to the bar, pouring himself a whiskey with shaking hands. The properties are marital assets. What belongs to my wife belongs to me, naturally. That's not how Nigerian property law works, sir, Mrs. Hassan said quietly. The whiskey glass paused halfway to Kemi's lips. I'm sorry. Marital property laws in Nigeria are complex, but they don't automatically grant ownership rights to a spouse's individually held assets, especially properties acquired before marriage or through inheritance. Kemi's facade began to crumble. But surely, after 12 years of marriage, did you contribute financially to the purchase or maintenance of these properties? Mr. Ogundipe asked. Kemi looked at Adunni desperately. She remained silent, watching her husband dig his own grave with every word. It's complicated. It's actually quite simple, Mrs. Hassan said, consulting her tablet. We've completed our due diligence. The Victoria Island apartment complex is owned entirely by Okafor Holdings Ltd., a company registered to Mrs. Folake Okafor and Mrs. Adunni Okafor. Your name appears nowhere in the ownership structure. This is impossible, Kemi sputtered. I've been managing that property for years. Managing? Adunni spoke for the first time since the meeting began. Is that what you call using it to house your mistress? The bankers shifted uncomfortably as the domestic drama unfolded before them. Adunni, please, Kemi pleaded. Not in front of. In front of the people you've been lying to for months? Her voice cut like ice. The same people you convinced to lend you 58 million naira based on properties you don't own? Mr. Ogundipe cleared his throat. Mr. Okafor, we need to discuss immediate repayment options. If you cannot provide alternative collateral. How much time do I have? 48 hours to provide suitable collateral or begin repayment proceedings. Kemi's face went ashen. 48 hours? That's impossible. I need at least a month to liquidate assets. What assets? Mrs. Hassan's voice was gentle but relentless. According to our investigation, your construction company has negative equity. Your personal accounts show minimal balances. The vehicles registered in your name are leased, not owned. Adunni watched her husband of 12 years realize that his house of cards was collapsing. Despite everything, the betrayal, the lies, the humiliation, she felt a flicker of something that might have been pity. Then she remembered Bisola's hands on her mother's wheelchair, and the feeling vanished. There is one option, she said quietly. Everyone in the room turned to look at her. The loans were taken fraudulently, using properties you don't own. The bank could write them off as a loss and pursue criminal charges for fraud. Mrs. Okafor, Mr. Ogundipe said carefully, are you suggesting we pursue legal action against your husband? I'm suggesting you have options beyond immediate repayment. Kemi stared at her as if she'd struck him. You would send me to prison? I would let you face the consequences of your choices. I'm your husband. You were my husband. Before you moved your girlfriend into my property. Before you lied to banks using my assets. Before you let that woman assault my disabled mother. Mrs. Hassan was typing rapidly on her tablet. Mrs. Okafor, would you be willing to provide a statement regarding the unauthorized use of your property? Yes. No. Kemi's voice cracked. Adunni, please. Think about what this means. If I'm arrested, if this becomes public. What? Your reputation will be ruined? Your business contacts will know you're a fraud. She stood slowly, moving to the window where she could see her mother's rose garden. Should I be more concerned about your reputation than you were about mine when you paraded your mistress through our social circles? That's different. Is it? Mr. Ogundipe was packing his documents. We'll need to report this to our legal department immediately. Mr. Okafor, I suggest you retain counsel. Wait, Kemi said desperately. There has to be another way. Adunni, we can work this out. The marriage, the loans, everything. She turned from the window, her decision crystallizing. There is another way. Hope flickered in Kemi's eyes. Yes. Sign over any legitimate claim to marital assets, agree to an uncontested divorce, and leave my house immediately. In return, I'll consider paying off your fraudulent loans to keep you out of prison. That's everything. You're asking for everything. I'm offering you your freedom instead of a criminal record. The room fell silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. Kemi looked around at the opulent surroundings. The house he'd called home for 8 years, the lifestyle he'd grown accustomed to, the wife whose success had made his life possible. I need time to think. You have until tomorrow morning. Mr. Ogendipe stood. We'll postpone any legal proceedings for 24 hours, pending resolution between the parties. But after that... After the bankers left, Kemi slumped into his chair, suddenly looking older than his 45 years. How did we get here, Adunni? She studied the man she had loved, supported, and trusted for over a decade. You tell me. When did you decide I wasn't enough? When did you choose her over us? It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? But before he could answer, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Your husband is weak. When this is over, he'll come crawling back to a real woman. Enjoy your victory while it lasts. B. Adunni showed Kemi the message. His face crumpled as he read it. She doesn't understand the situation, he said weakly. No, Adunni replied, pocketing her phone. She understands perfectly. Just like I do now. The battle lines were drawn. But as Adunni prepared for the final confrontation, she couldn't shake the feeling that Bisola had one more card to play. And she was right. Don't go anywhere. The next chapter reveals Bisola's shocking secret that changes everything. Smash that like button if you're loving this drama. Adunni found Mama Folake in the garden, her wheelchair positioned perfectly to catch the morning sun streaming through the mango trees. Despite her physical limitations, her mother still insisted on overseeing the gardener's work, her sharp eyes noting every wilted flower and overgrown hedge. He agreed to the divorce, Adunni said, settling on the bench beside her mother's chair. And the loans. I'll pay them off. It's cheaper than a protracted legal battle, and it keeps our family name out of the criminal courts. Mama Folake nodded approvingly. Smart. But what about the girl? What about her? Women like that don't disappear quietly, my daughter. She invested time and energy in your husband, expecting a return. When she discovers he has nothing to offer. Before Adunni could respond, Patience appeared at the garden entrance, looking worried. Ma, there's a woman at the gate. She's very angry, shouting about being evicted from her apartment. Adunni and Mama Folake exchanged glances. Let her in, Adunni said. Ma, let her in. It's time we had a proper conversation. 5 minutes later, Bisola stormed across the manicured lawn, her cheap heels sinking into the soft earth with each angry step. She wore a tight red dress that was entirely inappropriate for a morning confrontation, and her makeup was smudged as if she'd been crying. You vindictive witch, she screamed, pointing an accusatory finger at Adunni. You can't throw me out of my home. Your home. Adunni's voice remained calm. I was under the impression it was my apartment in my building. Kemi said it was ours. He promised me we were building something together. And what exactly were you building? Bisola's composure cracked slightly. A life. A real relationship with a man who appreciates me, not some dried-up old woman who can't even give him children. The words hit their intended target, but Adunni had armor that the younger woman couldn't penetrate. Years of societal pressure about childlessness had built thick skin. Interesting, Mama Folake interjected from her wheelchair. Tell me, child, what did you think you would gain from this relationship? Bisola turned her attention to the older woman, her expression contemptuous. More than you ever gave your daughter, old woman. At least I know how to keep a man happy. By sleeping with married men and living off their wives' money? It wasn't his wife's money. Kemi told me he built everything himself, that she was just a figurehead. Adunni almost felt sorry for the girl's naivety. Almost. And you believed him? Why wouldn't I? He drives expensive cars, wears designer clothes, owns properties across Lagos. Owned, Adunni corrected. Past tense. And none of it was ever actually his. For the first time since arriving, uncertainty flickered across Bisola's face. What do you mean? I mean your boyfriend has been living a lie for 12 years. The cars are leased in my company's name. The clothes were paid for with my credit cards. The properties belong to my family trust. That's impossible. Adunni pulled out her phone and showed Bisola the bank statements from the past month. These are his personal accounts. Tell me what you see. Bisola squinted at the screen, her face growing paler with each line item. The balances were pathetic. Barely enough to cover a week's groceries, let alone the lavish lifestyle she'd grown accustomed to. This can't be right. He just bought me jewelry last week. A gold bracelet worth 200,000 naira. Paid for with a credit card linked to my business account, Adunni said quietly. Every dinner, every gift, every romantic weekend. All funded by the woman you called dried up and worthless. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the sound of birds in the mango trees and the distant hum of Lagos traffic. You're lying, Bisola whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. Am I? Call him. Ask him to show you his bank statements. Ask him to prove ownership of any single asset he's claimed as his own. Bisola fumbled for her phone with trembling fingers, dialing Kemi's number. The call went straight to voicemail. He's probably at the lawyer's office, Adunni observed, signing divorce papers and trying to figure out how to restart his life with nothing. Nothing. The word came out as a squeak. Nothing. Unless you count the criminal investigation for fraud that he's trying very hard to avoid. Bisola sank onto the garden bench, her bravado completely deflated. For the first time, Adunni saw her clearly, not as a homewrecker or a seductress, but as a young woman who had been manipulated by a master of deception. How long has this been going on? Mama Folake asked gently. 8 months, Bisola whispered. He said he was separated, that the divorce was just a formality. He said she was vindictive and trying to steal his properties in the settlement. And you believed him? Why wouldn't I? He lived like a wealthy man. Everyone in the clubs, the restaurants, they all treated him like he was somebody important. Because of her, Mama Folake said, gesturing toward Adunni. Her success, her reputation, her money. He was living off reflected glory. Bisola looked up at Adunni with something that might have been respect mixing with her shame. You really own everything? All of it. My mother and I built it together, over 40 years of work. Every naira earned honestly, every property purchased legally. And he has nothing? He has his construction business, which exists primarily on paper and owes more money than it brings in. He has some tools and equipment, and a 10-year-old pickup truck that's fully paid off. The transformation in Bisola was remarkable. The confident mistress who had pushed an elderly woman in a wheelchair was gone, replaced by a girl barely out of university who was beginning to understand how thoroughly she'd been deceived. What happens to me now? She asked quietly. That depends on you, Adunni replied. The eviction notice gives you 72 hours to vacate the apartment. After that, it's trespassing. I don't have anywhere to go. My family. They disowned me when they found out about the married man. My friends think I'm living this glamorous life with a wealthy businessman. Despite everything, Adunni felt a stir of sympathy. She remembered being young and naive once, making mistakes that seemed so much smaller than this one. What did you do before Kemi? I was studying for my master's in business administration at University of Lagos. But when he started taking care of my expenses, paying my fees, I dropped out to spend more time with him. The picture became clearer. Kemi hadn't just been cheating. He'd been systematically destroying a young woman's future while building his fantasy life. Where were you studying? Unilag. Business school. I was in my final year. Adunni exchanged a glance with her mother. The Okafor Foundation provided scholarships to dozens of students at various Lagos universities, including several at Unilag's business school. What was your area of focus? Marketing and brand management. I wanted to start my own advertising agency someday. Bisola's voice carried a wistful note, as if she was remembering a dream she'd abandoned. And now I'm a homeless woman with no degree, no money, and a reputation as a homewrecker. Tears began to flow freely down Bisola's cheeks. I threw away everything for a man who was lying about everything. Mama Folake wheeled her chair closer to the bench. Child, look at me. Bisola raised her tear-stained face. You made a mistake. A big one. But you're what, 25? 26. 24. 24. Your life is far from over. But what I did to you, to your family. What you did was wrong, Mama Folake said firmly. You disrespected an elderly woman in her own home. You participated in adultery. You helped destroy a marriage. Bisola flinched at each accusation. But, Mama Folake continued, you were also deceived by a man who made lying an art form. The question now is, what are you going to do about it? Adunni studied the young woman carefully. There was intelligence there, beneath the poor choices and misguided anger. Intelligence that had been manipulated and misdirected, but intelligence nonetheless. I have a proposition, she said slowly. Both Bisola and Mama Folake looked at her with surprise. The Okafor Foundation funds several scholarship programs. If you're serious about completing your education, if you can prove you've learned from this experience, you would help me? Bisola's voice was incredulous. After everything, I would give you a chance to help yourself. But it comes with conditions. Anything. First, you testify truthfully about Kemi's fraudulent claims regarding the properties. The bank needs a full accounting of his lies. Bisola nodded quickly. Yes, of course. Second, you complete your degree with honors. No excuses, no shortcuts. Yes. Third, you never contact my family again after today unless it's through proper legal channels regarding the bank testimony. I understand. And fourth, Adunni's voice hardened slightly, you publicly acknowledge your role in destroying my marriage and apologize to my mother for your behavior in this house. This gave Bisola pause. Public acknowledgement would be humiliating, would destroy whatever social standing she had left in Lagos's gossip circles. The apology I can do, she said quietly, turning to Mama Folake. Ma, I'm deeply sorry for disrespecting you. You didn't deserve my anger or my rudeness. You've shown me more kindness in the last hour than I showed you in 5 minutes of knowing you. Mama Folake nodded graciously. Apology accepted, child. The public acknowledgement is non-negotiable, Adunni finished. If you want the scholarship, if you want the chance to rebuild your life, the community needs to know that actions have consequences. Bisola was quiet for a long moment, weighing her options. Finally, she nodded. Okay. Yes. I'll do it. Good. Patience will give you the contact information for the foundation director. Your first interview is Monday morning. As Bisola prepared to leave, she turned back one more time. Mrs. Okafor? Why are you helping me? Adunni considered the question carefully. Because destroying you won't undo what's been done. Because education is the best revenge against ignorance. And because... She paused, looking at her mother's knowing smile. Because every woman deserves a second chance to build something real instead of chasing someone else's illusion. After Bisola left, Mama Folake chuckled softly. That was either very wise or very foolish. Maybe both, Adunni admitted. But she's not the real enemy here. No, her mother agreed. The real enemy is upstairs, probably trying to figure out how to spin this disaster into someone else's fault. As if summoned by their conversation, Kemi appeared in the garden doorway, holding a manila envelope and looking like a man walking to his own execution. The papers are signed, he said quietly. It's over. Adunni looked at the man who had shared her bed, her dreams, and her life for 12 years. The man who had systematically betrayed everything she'd offered him. Yes, she said. It is. But even as she spoke the words, Adunni couldn't shake the feeling that the real drama was just beginning. Team Adunni or Team Forgiveness? What do you think of her decision to help Bisola? Hit that notification bell because the next chapter brings a twist no one sees coming. The law offices of Adelique, Adebayo and Associates occupied the entire 15th floor of a gleaming tower in Victoria Island. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Adunni could see the Atlantic Ocean stretching toward the horizon, its surface glittering in the late afternoon sun. She sat across from Kemi at a polished conference table, with their respective lawyers flanking them like seconds in a duel. The divorce papers lay between them, signed and notarized, officially ending their 12-year marriage. The asset division is straightforward, Barrister Adelique was saying. Mrs. Okafor retains all properties, businesses, and investments registered in her name or family trust. Mr. Okafor keeps his construction business, tools, equipment, and personal vehicle. And the debts? Asked Kemi's lawyer, Mr. Balogun, a thin, nervous man who clearly wished he was anywhere else. Mrs. Okafor has agreed to settle the fraudulent loans to protect both parties from criminal prosecution. In return, Mr. Okafor waives any claim to alimony or future support. Kemi stared at his hands throughout the entire proceedings, speaking only when directly asked a question. The confident man who had once commanded rooms full of business associates was gone, replaced by someone who looked defeated and much older than his years. There is one final matter, Barrister Adelique continued, pulling out another document. The criminal complaint. Both Kemi and his lawyer looked up sharply. Criminal complaint? Mr. Balogun asked. The banks filed fraud charges this morning, before we reached our settlement agreement. While Mrs. Okafor's payment will satisfy the civil debt, the criminal charges proceed independently. The color drained from Kemi's face. But you said. I said I would pay the loans. Adunni spoke for the first time since they'd sat down. I never said I would ask the banks to drop the criminal charges. Adunni, please. Mrs. Okafor, she corrected coldly. We're not married anymore. Mr. Balogun leaned forward urgently. What are we looking at in terms of penalties? Barrister Adelique consulted his notes. Fraud involving sums over 50 million naira carries a minimum sentence of 7 years imprisonment, with multiple counts across 6 different banks. How long? Kemi's voice was barely a whisper. 15 to 20 years, if convicted. The silence in the room was suffocating. Kemi's breathing became labored, and for a moment Adunni thought he might collapse. However, Barrister Adelique continued, the prosecutors are willing to consider a plea arrangement. What kind of arrangement? Mr. Balogun asked quickly. Full restitution, which Mrs. Okafor has already provided, plus cooperation in investigating similar fraud cases, plus community service, plus a suspended sentence with strict probation terms. Essentially admitting guilt but avoiding prison, Mr. Balogun translated. If he can stay out of trouble for 5 years. Kemi looked at Adunni desperately. You have influence with these banks. You could make them drop the charges entirely. Could I? Adunni's voice was thoughtful. Yes, probably I could. Hope flickered in his eyes. But I won't. Why? The word came out as a broken plea. Haven't you punished me enough? Adunni stood slowly, walking to the window. Lagos stretched out below her, the city where she'd built her empire, where her mother had started with nothing and created something lasting. Do you remember what you said to me the night I told you about my mother's stroke? Kemi frowned, clearly not remembering. You said that maybe it was a blessing. That caring for a disabled parent would hold back my business expansion. That maybe I should consider alternatives. Adunni, I was stressed, I didn't mean. You meant every word. Just like you meant it when you told your friends at the country club that you'd taught me everything I knew about business. Just like you meant it when you introduced Bisola to people as your business partner in properties you thought were yours. She turned back to face him. The fraud charges aren't punishment, Kemi. There are consequences. There's a difference. Please, he whispered. If I go to prison, my life is over. Your old life is over regardless. The question is whether you'll use this chance to build something honest, or spend the next 15 years in a cell thinking about what you threw away. Before Kemi could respond, Adunni's phone buzzed with an urgent call from Funmi. Ma, you need to come back to the office immediately. What's wrong? There's been a development. The police are here, and they're asking about more than just the bank fraud. Adunni felt ice form in her stomach. What kind of development? They found something at the Victoria Island apartment. Something that changes everything. 20 minutes later, Adunni sat in her office conference room facing Detective Inspector Amara Okafor, no relation. Despite the shared surname, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who radiated competence and barely contained anger. Mrs. Okafor, how well do you know Bisola Adesanya? We met yesterday for the first time. Why? Because she's been running a sophisticated blackmail operation out of your Victoria Island apartment. The words hit Adunni like a physical blow. What? Detective Okafor opened a laptop and turned it toward her. The screen showed photographs, dozens of them. Men in compromising positions with various women, clearly taken without consent. Financial documents. Bank account information. Names, addresses, phone numbers. We found this equipment hidden in the apartment's master bedroom. Professional photography gear, recording devices, encrypted hard drives containing compromising material on over 30 prominent Lagos businessmen. Adunni stared at the screen in horror. She was blackmailing people? For the past 8 months. The same period she was involved with your husband. Kemi knew about this? That's what we're trying to determine. But Mrs. Okafor, some of these photographs. Detective Okafor clicked through several images. Some of them appear to be taken in this house. Adunni's blood turned to ice as she recognized her own bedroom, her living room, even her mother's garden in the background of several photos. She was in my home once. Yesterday. According to the metadata, these photos were taken over several months. Someone gave her extensive access to this property. The implications crashed over Adunni like a tidal wave. Not only had Kemi been cheating, he had been facilitating a criminal operation that used her home as a base. Who are the victims? Bank executives, government officials, construction industry leaders. All people who would have influence over loan approvals, zoning permits, government contracts. People who could help Kemi's business. Exactly. We believe the blackmail operation was designed to secure favorable treatment for his construction company. Adunni sank into her chair, overwhelmed by the scope of the betrayal. It wasn't just adultery or fraud, it was organized crime, with her unwitting home as the headquarters. Detective, my husband signed divorce papers 2 hours ago. How much of this did he know? We'll know more after we interview him. But Mrs. Okafor, there's something else. What? One of the blackmail victims died by suicide last week. A bank executive who had been paying Bisola for months to keep his affair secret. The room spun around Adunni. A man was dead because of activities that had been orchestrated from her property by her husband and his mistress. We need to search this house thoroughly, Detective Okafor continued. And we need you to come in for a detailed statement about what you knew and when you knew it. Am I a suspect? Right now, you're a witness and a victim. But Mrs. Okafor, if we find evidence that you knew about the blackmail operation and didn't report it. I had no idea. Then help us prove that. Help us build a case against the people who turned your home into a criminal enterprise. As Detective Okafor prepared the search warrant, Adunni's phone rang. It was Kemi, calling from the lawyer's office. Adunni, we need to talk. There's been a misunderstanding about Bisola. The police are searching our house, she said quietly. They found the blackmail operation. The silence on the other end stretched for nearly a minute. Kemi, are you there? I can explain everything. Can you? Can you explain how a man is dead because of what you allowed to happen in my home? It wasn't supposed to go that far. It was supposed to help the business. A few compromising photos to ensure we got the contracts we deserved. Adunni hung up the phone and turned to Detective Okafor. "I'll tell you everything I know," she said. "And I'll help you put them both away for as long as the law allows." But as she spoke the words, Adunni realized that her nightmare was just beginning. Because if a man had died, if her home had been used for criminal activities, the scandal would destroy everything she'd built. Everything her mother had sacrificed for. Everything 3 generations of women had created. Unless she could find a way to fight back against enemies who had proven they would stop at nothing, including murder. Wait. Before you go, if you think Adunni can survive this scandal, hit like. If you think it's over for her, comment below. Either way, subscribe because the next chapter reveals who the dead man really was. The Okafor family mansion felt like a crime scene as police photographers documented every room, every corner, every surface that might have been contaminated by Kemi and by Sola's operation. Adunni sat in her mother's bedroom, the only space the police had agreed to leave untouched out of respect for Mama Folake's condition. "Tell me about the dead man," Mama Folake said quietly, her wheelchair positioned beside the window where she could watch the police activity in the garden. "His name was Mr. Emeka Nwosu, senior loan officer at First Bank of Nigeria." Adunni's voice was hollow with exhaustion. According to Detective Okafor, he had been paying Bisola 50,000 naira monthly to keep photos of his affair secret. And when the payments became too much, he jumped from the 3rd mainland bridge last Thursday night. Left behind a wife and 3 children. Mama Folake closed her eyes in prayer. "May God forgive us all. Mama, we didn't know. Ignorance doesn't resurrect the dead, my daughter. That man's blood is on all our hands now." Before Adunni could respond, Detective Okafor appeared in the doorway, holding an evidence bag containing what looked like a small recording device. "Mrs. Okafor, we found this in your bedroom closet, behind your jewelry box." Adunni stared at the device in horror. "How long has that been there?" "Based on the dust patterns, several months. It's voice-activated, with a range that would cover your entire bedroom and bathroom." The violation felt absolute. Not only had Kemi brought another woman into their bed, he had recorded their most intimate moments for potential blackmail purposes. "What else have you found?" "Hidden cameras in 3 other rooms, including your home office. Financial records showing systematic blackmail of 15 different men. And..." Detective Okafor paused uncomfortably. "And evidence that this operation extends far beyond your husband and his girlfriend." "What do you mean?" "We mean there's a bigger organization behind this," said a new voice from the doorway. Adunni turned to see a tall man in an expensive suit, carrying himself with the authority of someone accustomed to commanding attention. Detective Okafor straightened respectfully as he entered. "Mrs. Okafor, this is Deputy Commissioner Adebayo, head of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission's Special Investigation Unit." "Mrs. Okafor," the Deputy Commissioner said, settling into a chair across from her. "Your house was being used as headquarters for what we believe is Lagos's largest blackmail and extortion ring." "That's impossible. This is my family home." Which made it perfect cover. A respected businesswoman's residence, above suspicion, with access to high society events and private gatherings. His voice carried no accusation, just grim professionalism. "Someone very clever chose this location specifically because of your reputation." Mama Folake wheeled her chair closer. "You're saying my daughter was targeted?" "I'm saying someone identified Mrs. Okafor as the perfect unwitting accomplice. Wealthy, socially connected, trusting of her husband, and completely clean legally." The implications made Adunni feel sick. Who would do something like that? "We're still investigating. But the sophistication of this operation, the quality of the equipment, the systematic targeting of specific individuals, this required significant funding and expertise." Detective Okafor consulted her notes. "Mrs. Okafor, we need to ask some difficult questions about your husband's associates and business contacts." "Of course. Over the past year, did he introduce you to anyone new?" Anyone who seemed particularly interested in your home or your social connections. Adunni thought back through months of dinner parties, business events, and social gatherings. There were several new people. Kemi was always networking, trying to expand his construction business. Anyone who seemed to pay special attention to your house? Who asked questions about your security system, your staff, your schedule? A memory surfaced. A man at a charity gala 3 months ago, someone Kemi had introduced as a potential investor in his construction company. The man had been charming, sophisticated, and oddly interested in the details of their home life. There was someone, she said slowly. Dr. Chinedu Okoro. He said he was interested in investing in Kemi's business. Deputy Commissioner Adebayo and Detective Okafor exchanged glances. Describe him. Tall, maybe 50 years old, very well dressed. He spoke with an American accent, said he'd recently returned from the United States. He seemed to know a lot about my business interests, asked detailed questions about my daily routine. Did he ever visit your home? Once. Kemi brought him for dinner about 2 months ago. He was very complimentary about the house, asked for a tour. He seemed particularly interested in the security system and the staff quarters. Detective Okafor was typing rapidly on her phone. Mrs. Okafor, there is no Dr. Chinedu Okoro in our database of registered professionals. The name appears to be an alias. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. He was scouting the house, Mama Folake said quietly. Planning the operation. It appears so, Deputy Commissioner Adebayo confirmed. Your husband was likely being manipulated from the beginning. Someone identified him as vulnerable. Financial pressures, ego issues, marital problems, and exploited those weaknesses. You're saying Kemi was a victim too? I'm saying he was a tool. Whether willing or unwitting, we're still determining. Adunni's phone rang. Kemi calling again. This time, she answered and put it on speaker so the police could hear. Adunni, we need to meet. There are things about Bisola, about the whole situation, that you don't understand. I understand that a man is dead because of what you allowed to happen in my house. Mr. Nwosu's death wasn't supposed to happen. The whole thing got out of control. So you knew about the blackmail? I knew some of it, but not all of it. Adunni, I was being blackmailed too. This revelation stopped everyone in the room cold. What do you mean? The man you met, Dr. Okoro, he had photos of me with Bisola. He threatened to send them to you, to your business partners, to destroy both our reputations unless I cooperated. Cooperated how? By giving him access to our social circle. By helping identify potential targets for the operation. By... His voice broke. By letting them use our house when you were traveling for business. Deputy Commissioner Adebayo gestured for Adunni to keep him talking. Who else was involved, Kemi? I don't know all of them. But there are people in government, people in banking, people who made this whole thing possible. Adunni, I'm scared. If they think I'm going to expose them. The line went dead. Detective Okafor was already on her radio, calling for units to locate and protect Kemi. If he's telling the truth, if he was being manipulated, then he's now a liability to whoever is really running this operation. What does this mean for my family? Adunni asked. It means you're in danger, Deputy Commissioner Adebayo said bluntly. If this organization is as sophisticated as it appears, they won't hesitate to eliminate witnesses. We need to get you and your mother to a secure location immediately, Detective Okafor added. As if summoned by their conversation, Patience appeared in the doorway, looking frightened. Ma, there are men at the gate. They say they're private security, here to ensure your safety. But they don't look like regular security guards. Through the bedroom window, Adunni could see black SUVs blocking the street. Men in dark suits and sunglasses stood beside the vehicles, their posture radiating menace rather than protection. Those aren't security guards, Deputy Commissioner Adebayo said grimly, drawing his service weapon. They're cleanup crew. The battle for her life, and her mother's, was about to begin. But as police officers took defensive positions throughout the house, Adunni realized she had one advantage her enemies might not expect: a mother who had survived 40 years in Lagos business by being smarter and tougher than anyone imagined. "Mama," she whispered, "tell me you have a plan." Mama Folklake's smile was sharp as broken glass. "My daughter, I've been preparing for this conversation my entire life." OMG. Who is Dr. Okoro really? Are Adunni and Mama Folklake about to be eliminated? Smash that like button and subscribe with notifications on, because next chapter is going to be insane. The power went out at exactly 7:43 p.m., plunging the Okafor mansion into darkness just as the men in black SUVs began moving toward the gates. But instead of panic, Mama Folklake's voice cut through the darkness with surprising authority. "Adunni, help me to the safe room. Now." "Safe room?" Detective Okafor asked, her voice tense as she and her officers tried to establish defensive positions in the unfamiliar house. "Built when we constructed this house 15 years ago," Mama Folklake explained as Adunni pushed her wheelchair down the hallway by feel. "My late husband insisted on it after the first kidnapping attempt on our daughter." "First kidnapping attempt?" Deputy Commissioner Adebayo followed them, his weapon drawn. "Business success in Lagos attracts dangerous attention," Mama Folklake said matter-of-factly. "The safe room has independent power, communications, and—" She paused as they reached what appeared to be a bedroom closet. "And some other features." Adunni pressed her palm against a hidden scanner, and the back wall of the closet slid away to reveal a steel-lined room equipped with monitors, communications equipment, and what looked like a small armory. "Jesus Christ," Detective Okafor whispered as emergency lighting illuminated the space. "This is a command center." "My husband was a careful man," Mama Folklake said, transferring herself from the wheelchair to a high-tech chair that could interface with the room systems. "He knew that wealth without protection is just a target." The monitors came alive, showing camera feeds from every angle of the property. The men in black had cut the main power and were now systematically approaching the house from multiple directions. "There are 12 of them," Deputy Commissioner Adebayo counted. "Professional assault team." "They're not here to kidnap us," Mama Folklake observed, watching their tactical approach. "They're here to eliminate witnesses." Detective Okafor was on her radio, calling for backup, but the response was concerning. "Ma'am, all units in the area are being diverted to other emergencies. It'll be at least 20 minutes before we get support." "20 minutes too long," Mama Folklake muttered, her fingers flying over the control panel. "Adunni, activate the perimeter defenses." "Perimeter defenses?" Mama Folklake's smile was grim. "Your father was paranoid, but he was thorough." The monitors showed the attackers' surprise as motion-activated floodlights blazed to life across the property, turning night into day and eliminating their tactical advantage. But that was just the beginning. "What are those?" Deputy Commissioner Adebayo asked, pointing to small devices emerging from hidden panels in the garden walls. "Non-lethal deterrent systems," Mama Folklake said. "High-pressure water cannons, tear gas dispensers, and—" She pressed another button. "Sonic weapons." The sound hit the attackers like a physical force, a high-pitched wail that sent them stumbling and disoriented. Several dropped their weapons, clutching their ears in agony. "Your father built all this?" Detective Okafor asked in amazement. "My father survived the Civil War, built a business empire, and raised a daughter who became more successful than he ever dreamed," Adunni said, understanding her family legacy for the first time. "Of course he prepared for every contingency." But their celebration was premature. The attackers regrouped quickly, producing what looked like military-grade equipment to counter the defenses. "They're professionals," Deputy Commissioner Adebayo observed grimly. "Probably former special forces." "Then we match them with professionals," Mama Folklake said, pressing a red button labeled Emergency Protocols. The change in the house was immediate and dramatic. Steel barriers slammed down over every window and door. The safe room sealed itself with a hiss of pressurizing air. And somewhere in the distance, an alarm began wailing. Not the house alarm, but something much more serious. "What was that?" Detective Okafor asked. Private military response, Mama Folake explained calmly. Your father contracted with a security firm run by former British SAS and Nigerian military special forces. The alarm triggers immediate deployment. How immediate? 5 minutes. Through the monitors, they watched the attackers realize their tactical situation had completely changed. The house had transformed from a target into a fortress, and they were now trapped in a killing field of defensive systems with professional military response incoming. Their leader, a tall man who moved with obvious authority, made rapid hand signals to his team. Most began withdrawing immediately, but 3 men continued advancing toward the house. Suicide mission, Deputy Commissioner Adebayo muttered. They're willing to die to complete the elimination. Why? Adunni asked. What could we possibly know that's worth this level of response? Her question was answered by an incoming call on the safe room's secure line. The caller ID showed only a number, but when Mama Folake answered, the voice that came through the speakers was cultured, confident, and coldly familiar. Mrs. Folake Okafor. I had hoped we could resolve this matter more diplomatically. It was Dr. Chinedu Okoro, or whoever he really was. Resolve what matter? Mama Folake asked, her voice giving nothing away. Your daughter's unfortunate discovery of our business operations. Your family's regrettable involvement in Mr. Nwosu's death. The police investigation that threatens to expose relationships that have taken years to cultivate. What do you want? Complete silence. Your daughter signs a statement taking responsibility for the blackmail operation. Claims she discovered her husband's infidelity and orchestrated the entire scheme in revenge. She serves a reduced sentence while the real architects of this operation continue their work undisturbed. And if we refuse? Then you die tonight, along with the police officers currently protecting you. Your deaths will be attributed to a robbery gone wrong. The investigation will conclude that Mrs. Adunni Okafor was killed by her own victims when they discovered her blackmail scheme. Detective Okafor was frantically signaling her radio, trying to reach backup, but there was only static. You're jamming communications, she realized. I'm controlling the entire situation, Dr. Okoro's voice confirmed. The police backup that was promised? Diverted to a fabricated emergency on the other side of Lagos. The private military response your security system triggered? Intercepted and delayed by official government orders. You are completely alone. Mama Folake looked at her daughter, seeing fear but also determination in Adunni's eyes. The same look she'd had as a child when bullies tried to take her lunch money, the same steel that had built an empire from nothing. Dr. Okoro, Mama Folake said calmly, you've made one critical error in your calculations. And what would that be? You assumed that because I'm an elderly woman in a wheelchair, I'm helpless. That because my daughter is a legitimate businesswoman, she's naive. Mama Folake's voice hardened. You forgot that we survived 40 years in Lagos business by being smarter and more ruthless than men like you. On the monitors, they could see the 3 suicide attackers had reached the house and were placing what looked like explosive charges on the reinforced doors. Your threats are meaningless, old woman. In 60 seconds, those doors will be breached and what? Mama Folake interrupted. Your men will discover that every conversation in this room has been recorded and transmitted in real time to 12 different locations, including the Office of the Inspector General of Police, the EFCC headquarters, and several international intelligence agencies. The silence on the line stretched for several seconds. Impossible. Is it? Check your secure communications, Doctor. How many of your encrypted channels have gone silent in the past 10 minutes? Detective Okafor was staring at Mama Folake in awe. You've been running a counter-surveillance operation. My daughter, when you've been in business as long as I have, you learn that the best defense is knowing your enemies before they know you're watching them. Mama Folake's fingers danced over the control panel. Dr. Okoro, meet the real Folake Okafor. Former military intelligence officer, retired special operations coordinator, and current advisor to 3 different West African governments on organized crime prevention. The revelation hit Adunni like a thunderbolt. Mama, you were never just a traitor. I was always much more than that, my dear. Your father knew. Your education abroad, your business opportunities, the protection you've always had, none of it was luck. On the secure line, Dr. Okoro's voice had lost its confident edge. This changes nothing. My men are all ready. Your men are surrounded by a joint task force of EFCC special operations and military intelligence operatives who have been tracking your organization for 18 months, Mama Folake said matter-of-factly. The attack on this house was the trap we needed to identify your entire network. The monitors showed exactly what she described. Professional military units emerging from positions around the property, surrounding the attackers with overwhelming force. The suicide team at the doors found themselves facing armed soldiers instead of helpless victims. You were never investigating us, Deputy Commissioner Adebayo said, understanding dawning on his face. We were investigating for you. The EFCC has been infiltrated by Dr. Okoro's organization for months, Mama Folake confirmed. Corrupt officers feeding information, cases being buried, evidence disappearing. We needed to flush them out. So you used us as bait, Detective Okafor said, but there was admiration in her voice rather than anger. I used my daughter's crisis as an opportunity to destroy a criminal organization that has killed 12 people and corrupted dozens of officials, Mama Folake corrected. Sometimes the greater good requires personal sacrifice. Through the secure line, they could hear shouting and gunfire as Dr. Okoro's command center was raided simultaneously with the assault on the house. You've destroyed me, his voice came through, full of rage and defeat. No, Mama Folake said softly. You destroyed yourself the moment you decided to use my daughter's home for your criminal enterprise. The moment you made my family complicit in murder. This isn't over. There are others, people in positions you can't imagine. People whose names and crimes are all recorded in your encrypted files, which our cyber warfare specialists have been copying for the past hour, Mama Folake said. It's very over, Doctor. For you and everyone in your organization. The line went dead. In the sudden quiet, Adunni stared at her mother as if seeing her for the first time. How long have you been planning this? Since the day you called to tell me about Kemi's affair, Mama Folake admitted. I knew immediately that it wasn't simple adultery. The timing, the sophistication of his lies, the financial fraud, it all pointed to a larger operation. You could have told me. And risk you acting differently? Risk tipping off the organization that we were onto them. Mama Folake reached for her daughter's hand. My dear, you played your role perfectly because it was genuine. Your pain, your anger, your desire for justice. All of it was real and necessary. Detective Okafor's radio crackled to life as communications were restored. All units, this is command. Operation Kingmaker is complete. 47 arrests across Lagos and Abuja, including 12 government officials and 6 bank executives. The network is broken. Deputy Commissioner Adebayo was coordinating with the tactical teams securing the property. Through the monitors, they watched as Dr. Okoro, whose real name was Charles Nkem, a former intelligence officer turned criminal mastermind, was led away in handcuffs. What happens now? Adunni asked. Now we rebuild, Mama Folake said simply. The scandal will be contained. The official story will be that you uncovered the criminal operation and cooperated with authorities to destroy it. Your reputation will not only survive, it will be enhanced. And Kemi will testify against the organization in exchange for immunity. His role as an unwitting accomplice will be documented, and he'll have a chance to rebuild his life honestly. And Bisola will complete her degree as agreed, but under the supervision of a federal rehabilitation program for victims of criminal manipulation. As the immediate crisis passed and normal life began to seem possible again, Adunni reflected on how completely her world had changed in just 3 days. Mama, why didn't you ever tell me about your real background? Mama Folake was quiet for a long moment, watching the sunrise through the safe room's monitors. Because I wanted you to have something I never had. The freedom to build something legitimate, something clean, something that didn't require looking over your shoulder every day. She turned to face her daughter. You accomplished everything I dreamed of and more. You became successful without compromising your integrity. But I married a criminal. You married a weak man who was manipulated by criminals. There's a difference. As they prepared to leave the safe room and return to normal life, Adunni realized that her mother's greatest gift hadn't been the financial foundation for her business empire. It had been the strength to survive anything and the wisdom to know that sometimes the only way to protect the people you love is to let them fight their own battles while secretly ensuring they have the tools to win. What do we do next, Mama? Next, we go back to being a family. A honest, successful, completely legitimate family. Mama Folake smiled, but perhaps with slightly better security systems. As mother and daughter emerged from their fortress into the morning light, Adunni couldn't help but smile at the irony. She had thought she was getting a divorce. Instead, she had gotten her life back. Whoa. Did you see that twist coming? Mama Folake was a secret agent. Hit like if you're shook and comment your favorite moment. But we're not done yet. The next chapter reveals what happens when the dust settles. 3 months later, Adunni stood in the boardroom of the newly renovated Okafor Towers, addressing a room full of journalists, business leaders, and government officials. The official inquiry into the blackmail network had concluded, and the results were about to be made public. The investigation revealed a sophisticated criminal enterprise that infiltrated our financial institutions, corrupted government officials, and destroyed lives, she said, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was revealing. My family's cooperation with law enforcement has resulted in the prosecution of 63 individuals and the recovery of over 800 million naira in stolen funds. The questions came fast and sharp from the assembled reporters. Mrs. Okafor, how did you first become aware of the criminal activity? When I discovered that my husband had been manipulated into allowing our home to be used as headquarters for the operation. The moment I learned of the blackmail scheme, I contacted authorities. What was your role in the investigation? My mother and I provided intelligence, resources, and access that law enforcement needed to identify and capture the entire network. There are rumors that your mother has a background in military intelligence. My mother's service record remains classified, but I can confirm that her expertise was invaluable in dismantling this organization. What she didn't tell the reporters was how completely her life had changed since that night in the safe room. The divorce from Kemi had been finalized quietly, with him entering witness protection after his testimony helped convict the network's leadership. Bisola had not only completed her degree but had become the public face of a new foundation helping victims of criminal manipulation. And Mama Folake had revealed layers of her past that continued to amaze and humble her daughter. After the press conference, Adunni found her mother in the executive lounge, reviewing financial reports with the same sharp attention to detail she'd always shown. The stock prices have recovered completely, Mama Folake observed. In fact, they're higher than before the scandal broke. People trust companies that help law enforcement more than those that hide from it, Adunni replied, settling into the chair beside her mother. And the new contracts? Government reconstruction projects worth 2 billion naira over the next 5 years. Apparently, integrity has significant market value. Mama Folake smiled. Who would have thought? The intercom buzzed, and Funmi's voice announced, "Ma, there's someone here to see you. Says it's personal." Adunni frowned. Her schedule showed no personal appointments for the day. "Send them in." To her complete surprise, Kemi walked through the door. He looked different, thinner, older, but somehow more solid. The expensive suits and flashy jewelry were gone, replaced by simple clothing and an air of quiet dignity she'd never seen in him before. "Hello, Adunni, Mrs. Folake." Mama Folake nodded politely but said nothing. "Kemi," Adunni said carefully, "I thought you were still in witness protection." "I was." The program ended last week after the final convictions. He remained standing, clearly uncomfortable but determined. "I wanted to speak with both of you before I leave Lagos." "Leave?" "I've accepted a position with a construction company in Port Harcourt. Small projects, honest work, building my reputation back from nothing." He looked directly at Adunni. "I know I can never undo what I did to you, to your family, to our marriage. But I wanted you to know that everything I've learned about being a man worth respecting, I learned from watching you pick up the pieces of what I destroyed." The words hung in the air between them. Adunni studied the man she'd been married to for 12 years, seeing perhaps for the first time who he could have been if pride and weakness hadn't corrupted him. What happened to us, Kemi? I stopped appreciating what I had and started resenting what I thought I deserved. His voice was quiet, reflective. I let other people convince me that being supported by a successful woman made me less of a man, instead of understanding that it made me incredibly lucky. And now I understand that being a man means taking responsibility for your choices and their consequences. It means building something honest instead of stealing credit for what others built. He paused. It means knowing when to walk away so the people you've hurt can heal. Mama Folake spoke for the first time since he'd entered. What will you do in Port Harcourt? Start over. Build a small company focused on low-income housing projects. Use what I learned from my mistakes to help other people build legitimate businesses. He looked at both women. I'll never be wealthy like you, but maybe I can be useful. That's all any of us can hope for, Mama Folake said softly. Kemi turned to leave, then stopped at the door. Adunni, I want you to know what you did, exposing the criminal network, helping the police, saving other people from what happened to us. It was the bravest thing I've ever seen anyone do. After he left, mother and daughter sat in comfortable silence for several minutes. Do you think he's really changed? Adunni asked. I think he's finally had to face who he was without the illusions, Mama Folake replied. Whether that makes him a better man remains to be seen. Do you think I should have tried to save the marriage? Mama Folake considered the question carefully. My daughter, some things cannot be saved. They can only be survived, learned from, and left behind so that better things can grow in their place. And what better things are growing? Look around you. Your business is stronger than ever. Your reputation for integrity has opened doors that money alone never could. You've helped destroy a criminal organization and saved lives. Mama Folake smiled. And most importantly, you've learned that you are strong enough to survive anything life throws at you. The intercom buzzed again. Ma, there's a call from the Ministry of Trade. They want to discuss your proposal for the new export development program. As Adunni prepared to take the call that would likely result in another major government contract, her mother wheeled her chair to the window overlooking Lagos. You know, Mama Folake said thoughtfully, 40 years ago when I was starting my trading business, I used to look out at this city and dream about what my daughter might accomplish here. Did I meet your expectations? My dear child, you exceeded my wildest dreams and then created new dreams I never dared to imagine. The phone call was everything they'd hoped, a partnership that would not only bring substantial revenue but would help develop Nigeria's agricultural export capacity, potentially benefiting thousands of farmers and small business owners. After hanging up, Adunni looked at her mother with wonder. How is this possible? 6 months ago I was a successful businesswoman with a failing marriage. Today I'm a government partner with a reputation for integrity that opens doors I never even knew existed. Today you're a woman who has been tested by fire and emerged stronger, Mama Folake corrected. The business success is just a reflection of the person you've proven yourself to be. A person who was betrayed, humiliated, and nearly destroyed by criminals using my own home. A person who fought back intelligently, protected her family, and helped law enforcement save other families from the same fate. Mama Folake's eyes sparkled with pride. A person who chose justice over revenge and rebuilding over destruction. As the sun set over Lagos, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Adunni reflected on how completely her definition of strength had changed. She had thought strength meant building walls high enough to protect what you loved. Now she understood that true strength meant being willing to tear down those walls when necessary to fight for what was right. What happens next, Mama? Next, we continue building. Continue growing. Continue showing the world that honest success is not only possible but more rewarding than any shortcut or compromise. And personally? Mama Folake's smile was mischievous. Personally, my daughter, you're 42 years old, beautiful, intelligent, wealthy, and completely free to write the next chapter of your life however you choose. Any suggestions? Live boldly. Love carefully. Trust wisely. And remember that the best revenge against those who tried to destroy you is a life so successful and fulfilling that their betrayal becomes just a small chapter in a much larger story. As they prepared to leave the office, Adunni realized that her mother was right. The betrayal, the scandal, the near destruction of everything she'd built, it was already becoming just a chapter in her story. But the strength she'd discovered, the integrity she'd proven, the bond she'd forged with her mother, those would last forever. And tomorrow would bring new opportunities to build something even better than what she'd lost. Are you ready for the ultimate conclusion? Drop a fire if you think Adunni's journey has been incredible. Subscribe and hit that bell for the final chapter. 1 year later, the Okafor Foundation's annual gala filled the ballroom of the Eco Hotel with Lagos's most influential citizens. Adunni moved through the crowd with the confidence of a woman who had rebuilt her life from the ashes of betrayal and emerged stronger than ever. The scholarship program has funded education for 247 young women this year, she was telling the Minister of Education, including 15 women who were victims of various forms of manipulation or abuse. Remarkable, the minister replied. The President has specifically asked me to commend your work in turning personal tragedy into public service. Across the room, Adunni spotted Bisola, now Dr. Bisola Adesanya, having completed her master's degree with honors and begun a PhD in criminology. She was deep in conversation with several young women, presumably sharing her story of redemption and second chances. She's become quite the advocate, Mama Folake observed, wheeling her chair to join them. At 71, she had somehow grown more formidable rather than more frail, her role in destroying the criminal network having earned her legendary status in Lagos society. The best advocates are those who've survived what they're fighting against, Adunni replied. The evening's program began with a video presentation about the Foundation's work, followed by testimonials from scholarship recipients. But the most powerful moment came when Bisola took the stage to address the audience. 3 years ago, I was a foolish young woman who thought success meant finding a wealthy man to take care of me, she began, her voice steady and clear. I participated in the destruction of a marriage, the humiliation of an elderly woman, and ultimately became complicit in criminal activities that cost a man his life. The ballroom was completely silent. The woman whose marriage I helped destroy could have had me imprisoned. She could have let the courts destroy my future completely. Instead, she gave me something I didn't deserve and hadn't earned, a second chance. Bisola's eyes found Adunni in the crowd. Mrs. Adunni Okafor taught me that true strength isn't about taking what you want from others. It's about building something meaningful with your own hands, using your own mind, creating value instead of stealing it. The applause was thunderous. After the formal program, as guests mingled and the evening wound down, Adunni found herself alone on the hotel's terrace, looking out over Lagos's glittering skyline. Reflecting on the year, a voice asked behind her. She turned to find Detective Okafor, now Chief Detective Okafor, having been promoted for her role in breaking the criminal network. Reflecting on how much can change in such a short time, Adunni replied. Any regrets? Adunni considered the question carefully. The past year had brought challenges she'd never imagined. Congressional testimony, international media attention, the constant scrutiny that came with being a public figure in the fight against corruption. But it had also brought rewards beyond measure. Respect from peers who truly understood what she'd accomplished, partnerships with organizations working to protect other families from similar exploitation, and most importantly, a deeper relationship with her mother based on complete honesty and mutual respect. No regrets about exposing the truth, she said finally. But I do regret how long it took me to really know my own mother. She's quite a woman. She's extraordinary. I spent 42 years thinking I was protecting her, not realizing she was protecting me. Chief Detective Okafor smiled. The case files on her activities during the investigation read like something from a thriller novel. Military intelligence training, international law enforcement contacts, surveillance operations that would impress professional spies. She says it was just good business sense taken to its logical conclusion. Maybe. Or maybe some women are born to be warriors, whether they're fighting in boardrooms or safe rooms. As they talked, Adunni's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Congratulations on the gala. Your resilience is inspiring. Hey, Kemi. She had heard through mutual contacts that his small construction company in Port Harcourt was growing steadily, that he was building a reputation for honest dealing and quality work. She showed the message to Chief Detective Okafor, who read it with raised eyebrows. "Are you going to respond?" "I don't think so," Adunni said after a moment. "Some chapters of your life are meant to stay closed." Wise policy. As the evening ended and guests began to leave, Adunni joined her mother for the ride home through Lagos traffic. The familiar chaos of the city felt comforting now, a reminder that life went on, that challenges could be met and overcome, that tomorrow always brought new possibilities. "Successful evening," Mama Folake observed. "Very. The foundation raised enough to fund scholarships for 300 women next year." "And personally?" Adunni smiled at her mother's persistent interest in her romantic life, or lack thereof. "Personally, I'm exactly where I need to be. Successful, independent, surrounded by people who respect me for what I've built rather than what they can take from me." "And lonely." "Sometimes. But loneliness is temporary. Self-respect is permanent." Wise words. But don't let wisdom become an excuse for closing your heart completely. As they pulled through the gates of the family compound, now equipped with military-grade security systems but somehow feeling more welcoming than ever, Adunni reflected on her mother's advice. She was open to love, when the right person came along. But she would never again mistake need for love, or compromise for partnership, or manipulation for affection. "Mama," she said as they prepared to go inside, "what would you have done differently if you could do it all again?" "Nothing," Mama Folake replied without hesitation. "Every choice, every mistake, every triumph led us to who we are today. And who we are today is pretty magnificent." Inside the house, Adunni went through her evening routine in the bedroom that had once been contaminated by betrayal and surveillance. The room had been completely renovated, stripped down to the studs and rebuilt as a sanctuary of peace and privacy. As she prepared for sleep, she thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. The devastating discovery of her husband's betrayal. The systematic destruction of every illusion about her marriage. The revelation of criminal activities that threatened everything she'd built. And then the fight back. The careful planning, the strategic alliances, the patient gathering of evidence. The night when enemies had come to kill them and found themselves trapped by the very people they tried to eliminate. Most importantly, the discovery that she was stronger than she'd ever imagined, that her mother was a force of nature disguised as a gentle elderly woman, and that integrity was not just morally correct but practically effective. Her phone chimed with a final message of the day, a text from Dr. Basola. "Thank you for everything. Because of your example, I'm starting a non-profit to help other women escape manipulation and abuse. We're calling it Second Chances Foundation. Would you consider serving on the advisory board?" Adunni smiled and typed back, "I would be honored." As she turned off the lights and settled into sleep, Adunni thought about the title of her story. Not the story others would tell about the businesswoman who exposed a criminal network, but the private story of personal transformation. She had started as a successful woman who thought she was strong. She had become a truly strong woman who happened to be successful. The difference, she realized, was everything. And tomorrow would bring new opportunities to use that strength in service of something bigger than herself. But tonight, she would sleep peacefully in her own bed, in her own house, surrounded by her own success, protected by her own choices. What an incredible journey! Did Adunni's transformation inspire you? Comment below with your biggest takeaway from this story. If you loved this tale of betrayal, revenge, and redemption, smash that like button, subscribe to Tales by Ben for more amazing stories, and share this with someone who needs to hear about the power of resilience. Where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. I love connecting with viewers from around the world. Until next time, remember, your strength is greater than any betrayal, and your future is bigger than your past.